everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Cláudia Gonçalves. Really solid try there, David. I'm a PhD student from Deakin University, and I identify as queer. Thank you. I do promise that's relevant to my talk. Believe it or not, I don't usually introduce myself like that. And to be honest, as a PhD student, it would probably be more accurate to describe myself as a non-practicing homosexual. I made this meme at 1 a.m. alone in my room, stroking my kitty. That's not a euphemism, you freaks. This is my cat. I know. I'll move on to a blank slide so you can actually pay attention to me. Welcome back, everyone. Hi. So my background is in psychology, which you might have already guessed from the nose ring and the dim light behind my eyes. And I'm researching how stigma impacts queer people who've experienced psychosis. And yes, this does mean that I've managed to make being queer relevant to my CV. Thank you. But on a serious note, psychosis itself isn't funny. I'm sure everyone here has either had a negative experience with their mental health, or we know someone who has. And we know that this can impact all areas of our lives, and psychosis in particular can be really difficult to cope with. So at its core, my project is about understanding how stigma impacts all of us, and to begin to fight that stigma. Just to ensure that the people who need support the most can actually access it. So why am I researching queer people specifically? Great question. Firstly, we are more likely to experience a range of mental health difficulties, including psychosis. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of them is that we are more likely to experience risk factors for psychosis. So this includes things like trauma, discrimination, and a strange obsession with Lady Gaga growing up. And secondly, we are a lot less likely to seek help when we do experience an issue with our mental health. I'm sure you're aware of this, but there's actually a lot of queer people in the world. Research estimates that nearly 20% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQA+, and I'm doing this talk in Melbourne, so in this room we have to at least double that. I see you guys. But we are a lot less likely to access and stay engaged with support for our mental health, and that includes when we experience psychosis. Now, I do recognize a lot of people here will have an instinctive negative response when they hear the word psychosis or psychotic. A lot of you will probably think of your ex. So I want to start by debunking some common misconceptions of psychosis that tend to come up in media that can kind of skew our perception of what that word means. So I firstly want to make it very clear that psychosis is not a dangerous murder with mommy issues. Psychosis is also not a dangerous murder with mommy issues. Seeing a pattern. And psychosis is certainly not a ghost of a dangerous murder with mommy issues. There it is. In spite of all these films' originality, these portrayals of mental illness in media can have an effect on how we as society perceive people with psychosis. So we might develop stigmatizing views of psychosis as dangerous or unpredictable. Some might even say that this can have an insidious effect. Can't believe you guys laughed at that one. But what this means is if you internalize the stigma and then you end up having those experiences, you might isolate yourself. If you isolate yourself, you're a lot less likely to reach out and ask for help if you need it, right? So I want to explain to you what psychosis actually is so that we can start to break down this wall. Yay! Thank you. At its core, psychosis refers to experiences of reality that are different to what we consider typical. So psychosis can include experiences like delusions. What this means is having beliefs that other people in your culture do not. So an example of this would be believing that you're a professional stand-up comedian because they gave you a microphone. Psychosis can also include hallucinations. So what this means is maybe seeing or hearing things that other people do not. An example of this would be looking out into the audience and seeing your dad smiling back at you when you haven't seen him in years. Dad? No. Again, thank you for laughing at my trauma. Psychosis is also probably more common than you think. So research estimates that nearly 8% of people will have a psychotic-like experience in their lifetime. So statistically, that means quite a few of us here today. So even if you personally haven't had this experience, it might be your friends, it might be your partner or your child, or it might be your cat meowing at the wall at 3 a.m. In all of these instances, the problem will probably not go away without intervention. So it's important to address it. Early intervention for people with psychosis has been shown to lead to better outcomes. Unfortunately, what psychiatry does a lot of the time is they put people in contact with services when they've already reached the crisis point. But we can actually prevent a lot of harm from being done if we put people in contact with services before they've lost relationships or jobs or housing. So it's important to act as early as possible. However, stigma can make this difficult. This is especially problematic for people from marginalized communities, because again, if you're isolating yourself, you're not reaching out for help. So as a researcher, I wanted to figure out how we can make it easier for these people to get support. To start, I reviewed the literature to see what existing research has already said about queer people with psychosis. I actually had some really, really interesting findings that I'm really excited to share with you all today. The main one was yikes. It turns out mental health services haven't always been perceived as the most welcoming. This might have something to do with the fact that every famous psychiatrist looks like this. Take it in. You might notice that they're all white, male, and look like they'd cut open trans people's brains for fun. But really, historically, it hasn't been safe for us as queer people to, disclose our identity to psychologists or to psychiatrists. Being gay was considered a mental illness until the 1970s. So it's not surprising that people like this haven't had much of an interest in understanding the experiences of queer people with psychosis. So to begin addressing this gap in our knowledge, I decided as a scientist, I was gonna follow a really innovative, really state-of-the-art methodology that's actually quite pioneering in the field of medicine. I actually talk to people. So I'm interviewing queer people who've had experiences of psychosis to begin to understand their perceptions of stigma and discrimination and to learn from them to make it better for other people in the future. Recruitment is going really, really well so far. I found that a really good way to get people really excited for research and to sit down and want to talk to you is by giving them $50. Maybe I should try that with my dating life. In the interviews, one thing that's consistently come up is the importance of social support. So when someone's already had negative experiences when opening up about their identity or their mental health, they were a lot less likely to seek support. On the flip side, if someone had a friend or a family member that was really encouraging to them, they were a lot more likely to seek support. It's a lot easier to overcome societal stigma when the people around you validate your experiences. So yes, it's true that we might not individually be able to undo all the damage that's been caused by people like this. Sorry, I recognize that's a really scary visual. I'll change that to something nicer. Much better. We can certainly make a difference to the people around us. So yes, psychosis can affect any of us, but you too can get involved in the fight against stigma. The best way that you can do this is by supporting the people around you, by listening to their experiences, make them feel safe to open up to you. If you're comfortable, maybe share your own experiences with them. This is obviously important for everyone, but it's especially important for your queer friends, because they're more likely to have already experienced stigma and marginalization. So, based on all my research, my final advice to you is very simple. It's just to go out and be open with the people in your life. If they're queer, I do have 2 bonus tips though. The first one is the absolute best way to get a queer person to feel safe to open up to you is by giving them $50. Always works. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, my last advice to you is if your queer friends are hot, I am single. Thank you, everyone.